Chapter 29, Chapter 27, The Return to India. Chapter 27, The Return to India. A band of mercenaries has recently relocated their headquarters to the Kotland Canyon in the south, near the Scandinavian border. I don't know if your group has ever worked with them or not, but they're apparently reputable, and they've been up to a great deal of unusual activity all over the world recently with no explanation given. Yes, I know what your friends are, and what you're doing these days. It wasn't hard to tell. We'll talk about that next time I see you. Watch your ass out there, and don't screw up too badly. If I'm not here when you return, don't trust the Church of Saint Eva. Daisy. The note had been left in a hidden drawer in Daisy's desk, next to her flask. Rand had found it when they had searched the house that night. The next day, they had gone south to check out the canyon in question, but when they had failed to find it after several days of searching, they had given up and come back home. Now they sat around the table as Nero grimly set the note down, everybody's face as bleak as the old man's now was.
This situation just got a hell of a lot more complicated, fellas, he said bluntly. And it was plenty of that already. No kidding.
Bao shook his head.
You're sure he was about to transform, buddy? Positive.
Ryu nodded.
The dragon's tear went black and everything. Ray and Kay's adopted brother is one of the demons. Doubt he was a demon lord, but if there's one demon in the Church of Saint Eva, there's probably more. Which means this fourth demon lord is probably the one running operations in there.
Sten scowled.
One in Sima, one in Highland, one independent, and one in Evray. Once we assume that nowhere is safe, that's the best plan of attack, alright.
He grimaced.
And a perfect way to screw us over. Those were all one thing, but running an operation against the Church of Saint Eva? That one's out of even our league. Understatement.
Ryu glanced around the table.
Which reminds me. As of right now, that particular fact doesn't leave this room. There's a lot of people in town who wouldn't be too happy about hearing that we're going up against the church, no matter what our rationale was. Kay most of all, I think. Yeah.
Bao made a face.
Hell, it's kind of getting to me. Don't get me wrong, it's what we gotta do, for Rand's mom, even if it wasn't demons. But, you know. Being a son of the church, and all.
He let it hang.
Yeah,
Kat admitted.
I've been thinking the same thing. How far is this gonna go? Are we gonna end up XCOM? X. You know, kicked out, or what? I mean, if that's what it takes.
She shrugged.
But if it doesn't have to go that way. You know. Speaking as somebody who's neutral on the matter.
Spar said politely.
I would consider it to be in the spirit of the faith to remove demonic corruption from it, yes? There may be trouble until that point, but should that be the case, then the revelation of the demon's presence should be more than enough to exonerate you. Sounds logical to me,
Ryu agreed, fighting a surge of guilt. Not only had he not considered that possibility at all himself, he hadn't been able to bring himself to care much when Bao and Kat did, and that realization worried him.
Good thinking. The question is, just how highly placed is this fourth demon lord? Yes.
Jean murmured, even the happy-go-lucky prince was finding nothing to be cheerful about in this situation.
To be able to subvert even a paladin. This is not something that an ordinary priest could do, I think. And the higher his position, the more difficult removing him will be. We can figure that out once we get to Evray.
Ryu shook his head.
No, the real question is, how are we going to get there? Our only plan for that contingency went out the window as soon as we pissed off Ray, and we can't just wait around for him to figure out we were right after all. Who knows how long that could take? Ray's a good guy, but he is a paladin. He shouldn't have taken sides against us,
Rand growled, arms crossed. The big man had been trying to act casual over the last few days, but nobody was fooled. They could all tell just how angry he still was about the situation.
That guy was dirtier than mud. I know, but it was his brother,
Nina murmured.
I'm not condoning that decision, but I can't blame him, either. I can,
Rand said, but didn't press it.
There is no point in arguing about it,
Spar murmured.
I do not know this Mr. Braddock like the rest of you, but I can tell that Ryu is right. He will not be assisting us again soon. We will have to find another way to Evray. Easier said than done,
Kat said dismally.
Not even Grandpa's gonna be able to manage a mile-high cliff. We'd need to fly to get up there.
She glanced at Nina, who had gone white suddenly.
Hey, what's wrong? Did I say something? No.
She shook her head quickly.
Nothing's wrong. Bull,
Dee said flatly.
You look like your ancestor just walked in here. Spill. It's just.
She started to hedge, then broke off as an explosion outside rattled the building.
Now what?
Ryu growled as they all jumped to their feet or, in Dee's case, Tail-An glared towards the sewer.
It never stops,
Nero groaned, leading the charge outside.
If I knew running a town was gonna be like this, I'd have told those 3 idiots to keep it at one building. Or at least set some kind of citizenship policy. Looks like it's coming from one of the newest houses,
Sten pointed out, and they all rushed over to find Burrows the magician and Elle the guard standing near a smoking crater on the house's lawn, arguing loudly.
I already told you, they invited me to come here.
The old man was yelling.
Now get lost, before I really lose my temper and actually aim the next one. Threaten me all you like, I don't care.
Elle responded just as loudly, though he was careful to stay away from the old man.
I've been assigned to guard this city, and that's what I'm going to do. Now come with me, and we'll see about that. Hold it, hold it, hold it,
Ryu called out as they ran up, and both men relaxed slightly, turning to him.
What exactly is going on here? I caught this intruder trying to sneak into this house.
Elle explained.
And when I tried to apprehend him he... Intruder nothing.
Burrows interrupted.
This moron called me a criminal and tried to drag me off to... You are a criminal.
Elle shouted.
That's what somebody who breaks and enters is. I didn't break anything, you useless dunce.
Burrows snarled.
How the hell did you get this job? Was there a lottery? Why don't you fellas let me handle this?
Nero suggested, stepping around the group.
Sure,
Ryu agreed quickly, he did not need a headache from this on top of everything else that had gone wrong recently.
Thanks. Is something wrong?
This was addressed to Sten, who was now staring at Elle curiously.
Hey, Elle,
he said, stroking his chin.
You sure you've been on Tunlin all your life? Positive, sir,
Elle replied quickly without looking at him, his argument with Burrows apparently forgotten immediately.
Why do you ask? Just curious.
Sten shrugged.
Something about you seems familiar. Problem is, I'm not sure what, and that doesn't happen very often. It's probably just a coincidence, sir,
Elle suggested, turning away from Burrows as well.
If you're going to deal with this, Mr. Money, I should return to my patrol.
Without waiting for an acknowledgement, he quickly walked off.
That was strange, yes.
Jean said, raising an eyebrow.
A little.
Ryu nodded, then frowned, noticing something else.
Hey, where's Nina? Looks like she slipped off,
Dee said, looking around.
Was there anything else? Not for now, I guess.
Ryu shrugged, still concerned.
Alright, everybody, start thinking about possible ways to get to Evray. Next meeting's postponed until somebody comes up with an idea that'll work. This might take a while,
Spar murmured, glancing at Rand.
It seems like a good time for what I suggested earlier. Oh, yeah.
Rand glanced at Burrows.
Hey, old man. You know a lot about earth magic, don't you? Of course I do.
Burrows snapped.
Why wouldn't I, you?
His insult died on his lips as he narrowed his eyes.
Wait a second here. Don't suppose you suddenly managed to use some out of nowhere on instinct recently? How'd you guess?
Rand nodded.
I've tried to do it again a couple times, but it never worked. I'd kind of like to learn how. You would better come in, then,
Burrows said, sounding reluctant about that.
This is gonna take more than a few minutes, even if you've got a natural talent. I would like to attend as well,
Spar said politely.
I suspect that there may be much I can learn. I will remain quiet and watch. Guess I'll go see how the hunting is today,
Bao decided.
Sound good to me.
Cat nodded.
Let's go. Have fun.
Ryu smiled as they wandered off, then glanced at the rest of the group.
How about you guys? I will go see how my friend, Salvatore, is doing,
Jean told him.
Think I'll check in with Beretta and Leamington.
Sten scratched his back, looking casual.
Kind of want to see how those requests we made a while back are coming along. I'm gonna see if I can find Nina,
Dee said, frowning.
I don't like how she was looking towards the end of that conversation. Me either.
Ryu shook his head.
Thanks.
As the others drifted away, he waited until they were out of earshot before speaking again.
Hey, Dees. Yeah.
She replied after a moment, standing still with her back to him.
What do you think?
He asked.
About this mess with the Church of Saint Eva. I don't really have an opinion,
she told him, again waiting a moment first.
The Church of Saint Eva wasn't around the last time I was awake, or any of the times before that. And I tried to just avoid the issue, back in Oria. The magic school wasn't exactly the kind of place where religious opinions were a big thing. And that's it.
Ryu pressed, narrowing his eyes.
You don't know, and you don't care. Pretty much.
She shrugged, still looking away, the tip of her tail twitching idly.
Religion's complicated these days, Ryu, and I'm not used to that. Until I woke up this time, it was always just Loden and Miria, either you worshipped him or her, or you just didn't bother. That was that, and the fact of the matter is I actually knew them both, so I didn't really look at either of them the same way normal people did, even though I knew firsthand just how different from mortals they were. I'm about the worst person in the world you could ask about this. Some would say you have an unique perspective on the matter,
Ryu suggested.
Maybe,
Dees admitted.
But if that's the case, it's not a good perspective. Is Saint Eva a real name? Not a very masculine one. And Namanda isn't much better. Who are they? Where'd they come from, and what do they want? Are they actual beings, and if they are, where are they now? How long have they been around, and if it's not only recently, why'd they wait so long before showing up? I'm not the sort of person who accepts that the only true God would just pop out of the air one day. I see your point.
Ryu chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Her argument, rather than being relaxing, was causing an ugly suspicion to dawn in the back of his mind, one he was instantly desperate to dispel.
And you're almost convincing. But there's more to it, isn't there? You're edgy. What aren't you telling me? One of those things you don't want me to tell you,
Dees replied after another significant pause.
Remember those? Those are still happening. And this is a big one. And it's related to gods.
Ryu scowled.
And the Church of Saint Eva. I don't think this is the time or place for this discussion, is it?
Dees pointed out.
You're hedging.
Ryu glanced around involuntarily. There didn't seem to be anybody else outside listening anymore, but he couldn't be certain.
What if it was something that was dangerous? Something that could kill us if we didn't know about it? Hypothetically. Would you tell us then, even if you knew we wouldn't like it? That's not hypothetical at all,
Dees scoffed, staring up at the sky.
Nice try, though. You're not answering,
Ryu said flatly.
No, I'm not.
She finally turned her head around to stare at him, face blank and eyes distant.
And I'm not going to. If you really want to know that badly, you might want to ask somebody with less of a personal connection to all of you. He might be less stubborn about it. And if he's not?
Ryu asked, though he knew she had a point.
Then he's not.
Turning away, she began slithering back towards the building.
I'm going to go see how Nina's doing now, like I said I would. Don't follow me.
Every one of Ryu's instincts urged him to yell something after her, but instead he simply turned and walked off, muttering under his breath. Leaving town, he went down to the seaside and spent the day fishing, hoping that the time spent on his favorite hobby would help him relax. Unfortunately, the fish refused to cooperate, and he returned home around nightfall, still feeling grumpy with nothing to show for his time. Neither Nina nor Dees were present at dinner, though Mrs. Rivov informed him that the latter had come by earlier to take enough food for two away. Ryu deliberately avoided talking about the conversation, or about his sudden fears, with any of the others. There was no sense in worrying them as long as there was any chance he was just being paranoid. After dinner, he walked over to sit down next to the statue of Loden, and he filled the god in on what had happened since last they had spoken.
It sounds as if things have been very difficult for you recently,
Loden said once he was done.
You have my sympathies. Thanks.
Ryu shrugged.
But what I'd appreciate more is information. That is something of a change,
Loden told him after a moment.
In the past, you have always striven to know as little about my side of things as possible, so that it would not restrict your path in life. How did you always put it? Ah, yes, destiny bullshit, wasn't it? That was then, and this is now.
Ryu shook his head.
Ran's mother was abducted by that walking, talking shit stain. Who knows if she's even still alive or not, but if she is, we have to do everything we can to get her back. Everything. An admirable sentiment,
Lawton acknowledged.
However, it is one that may lead to hasty decisions. Ones that you will be unable to take back, should you eventually regret them. I am entirely certain that this would be one of them. So there is something we don't know that you do.
Ryu narrowed his eyes.
Something relevant to this current situation. Something about the Church of Saint Eva. I know much about the Church of Saint Eva that many do not,
Lawton replied wearily.
I was here when it was founded, remember? I have watched this world for all of these years, unlike Dee's. I saw its rise, many centuries ago, and I watched the founding of Namanda as well. I can tell you that neither was exactly like what their current followers believe. And?
Ryu pressed.
What more can you tell me? That it was no coincidence that they did so then,
Lawton explained.
The world was losing faith in me, Ryu, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Windia had broken away from me completely, and doing so set an example which other countries and clans proceeded to follow, though none of them had the same, deeply personal reasons for doing so. It was more a general feeling of dislike and distrust for me, and when the Dragon Clan disappeared, well, that was the final straw. My fall from grace left a vacuum in the world, a void of faith that the people strove to fill. An opportunity,
Ryu said flatly.
You're saying Saint Eva saw his opportunity, and he took it. And his only competition was Namanda. A faith without a god. If that's how you want to put it,
Lawton replied, voice evasive.
That sounds like rules to me,
Ryu growled, staring straight ahead as he sat by the statue's side.
The kind of rules involved in this mess. Not everything is about you and your friends,
Lawton said, starting to sound irritated himself.
Then why has everybody been stalking us since we were kids?
Ryu demanded.
Because almost everything is, but not quite,
Lawton retorted.
Is this one of those things or not? You don't want to know. If I didn't want to know, why would I be asking you? Because you're feeling overly emotional, and you're making decisions you'll regret later. Why don't you let me worry about if I'll regret them? Because you'll still blame me if I do. How the hell do you know I will? Because I always get the blame, every time. Hey.
A third voice cut into their argument, and Ryu turned to see Kat standing behind him, arms crossed. Bending over, she dropped her voice to a low hiss.
Are you trying to break the news to all the other guys in town that we talk to a statue, and it talks back to us? Because if you are, you're doing a pretty good job of it. Shit.
Ryu stared down street, but was unable to see anybody else outside at the moment.
Sorry about that. Thanks. Indeed,
Lawton agreed, sounding embarrassed.
My apologies. That got out of hand. Sounded like it.
Kat sat down next to Ryu.
We're all kind of on edge right now. Ran's trying to act casual, but nobody's fooled. Sten's fighting the urge to get all hardcore and practical again. Even Jean's not up to acting like his normal self. And then there's Nina.
She sighed.
It really sucks being too dumb to put two and two together, you know. Tell me about it.
Ryu chuckled without a trace of humor.
Sometimes it feels like everybody else on this team except for the two of us is some kind of genius. Military, art, logic, magic. Especially the magic. Even Nero's an architect, and probably a lot more on top of that, not that we'll ever hear about it.
He shook his head.
And here's us, and we can't even figure out what's bothering Nina so much, even though I feel like I should already know. Same here,
Kat agreed.
She's my best friend, you know? I should know her well enough to figure it out, even if I'm a meathead.
She rested her head on his shoulder, and they both fell silent for a while, as the town remained dark and silent under the starry night. Eventually, though, she sighed before speaking again.
She'll still be awake. I know that much. She won't be leaving her room, though. But if you go and visit her, and ask what's wrong, I think she'll tell you. Kat.
Ryu turned his head to look into her eyes, glittering and green.
It's okay,
she told him.
You'll just be checking in on her, to see what's wrong, and if you can help, right? That's all. And if anybody else gets the wrong idea, I'll explain it to them. In detail.
She raised her head from his shoulder and tilted it back, staring up at the sky the same way Dees had earlier in the day.
Because she's my best friend. And you're... you. And I trust you both not to do anything, until we've got this mess straightened up between the three of us. Cat,
Ryu repeated, but this time his tone was more firm.
Thanks for understanding. I'm sorry, I guess, for doing this to both of you. Hey, don't get all dramatic on me now,
she teased, grinning lightly.
Give me a break, Ryu. You didn't do shit to us. This mess happened because we got ourselves into it, just as much as you did. And you know what? I don't regret it, and I don't think I ever will, even if... well...
He grin flickered for a moment.
You know. Yeah.
Ryu slowly nodded.
We will work this out, once all this crap is over with. I promise. That, or we'll all die young before then, so it won't be an issue, right?
She shoved him lightly, and it still had enough strength to make him stumble.
Go on, Ryu. She needs you more than I do, right now. Cat. Go, damn you,
she snarled then, turning away, and after a moment, Ryu did. The building seemed empty as he walked up the stairs to the 4th floor, whether it was, or if everybody was just staying in their rooms, he didn't check. Nina's was the first room up there. Reaching it, Ryu only stared at it for a moment before knocking on it.
Hey, Nina. It's me. Are you alright? Ryu.
She asked after a moment, and then the door opened. She was standing there, and it didn't look like she had been crying, or getting angry, or anything else he was used to that signified heavy emotions, she just looked exhausted.
I'm fine. I just haven't felt like myself today. Dee's brought me some dinner. I heard.
He nodded, took a deep breath, and kept going.
Did you want to talk about it? What?
She blinked, and after a long moment, slowly nodded.
That would be nice.
Turning, she walked over to the window, and Ryu followed her to it. Side by side, they looked out over the forest behind the town, and eventually she spoke again.
Ryu. I've been thinking. About what? About ARandomAudiobookAppeared,
she explained.
About how we need to get there, no matter what. I think I know a way. What's the catch?
He asked immediately, and she giggled lightly.
Are you sure you're an optimist? Practical optimism is still optimism, he pointed out. Besides, that's got nothing to do with this. There's a catch, isn't there? Yes, there is.
She hesitated for a moment before continuing.
Considering the circumstances, the only way we'd be able to get onto ARandomAudiobookAppeared would be by air. Flying. And the only thing I know of that can do that is also somewhat traditional for my namesakes, under these circumstances. For me, and them, to gain as we come of age. The breath of wind.
Ryu slowly nodded, remembering the books he had read about the Dragon Wars.
The Wing Clan princesses of both Dragon Wars awakened theirs during them.
He frowned.
But didn't you tell me once that the breath of wind wasn't working right, anymore? Because of interbreeding with the Dragon Clan? Yes.
Nina slowly nodded.
Even in those few who managed to awaken it, it's too chaotic to be trustworthy now, and most of us don't even have the option, including me. But I think there may be a way. You could say it's the royal family's greatest secret, for almost 1,000 years now. Ever since the death of the Queen of the Sky, our ancestor, and my namesake. I get it.
Ryu's eyes widened.
If it's a secret of the royal family, then for you to use it.
He left it hanging.
I would have to be openly acknowledged as one of them,
Nina confirmed quietly.
As Princess Nina Windia, who supposedly died 10 years ago, shortly before Nina Winfrey was enrolled in a high-class magic school a quarter of a world away. And that could get tricky.
Ryu winced.
That's a bit of an understatement.
She nodded slowly.
And even if we managed it, there would be difficulties in obtaining the secret. Difficulties. An ordeal, she explained. Something of a ceremony. Difficult, but not impossible. Ah.
He fell silent then, as did she, and they both watched the night sky for a bit before he spoke again.
I'm not going to decide for you, Nina. I can't. But if you think you can do this, I'll do everything I can to back you up. Everything. I think I can,
she whispered, and all of a sudden, Ryu realized that she wasn't telling him everything either, any more than Dees and Laden had. Unlike them, however, he instantly knew not to try and press her on it. Nina had always been the most fragile of them all, both physically and emotionally, and right now she was only holding herself together on sheer willpower. If he pushed her any further, she would break.
All right.
He took her hand in his, and smiled slightly.
We'll follow your lead on this one, then. Yes.
Her eyes sought his for a moment, and then she smiled as well, and though there was still more than a hint of resignation in it, there was resolve as well.
Yes, I can do this. Let's go back to India, Ryu. All of us. Sten and Rand both faced their pasts for us. I owe it to them. To you. To all of us to do the same now that it's my turn.
As quickly as her sudden burst of resolve had come, it faded, taking her smile with it as she glanced back out the window.
I just hope that I can go through with it, once we're there. You can,
Ryu assured her.
You will. I know you will. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Nina. And if you need backup, well, that's what we're for, isn't it? Thank you, Ryu.
Her hand tightened around his, and for a moment, they started to draw together, before she abruptly turned away.
I'm happy I met you. All of you, but you most of all. You changed my world. Nina.
He asked quietly, confused and more than a little worried now.
Is something wrong? No.
She glanced back at him.
It's just that. I'm glad you came in here to talk to me, but we should probably leave it at this. If we take this too much further.
She blushed slightly, looking down.
It wouldn't be fair. To Kat. Or to us. I guess not,
Ryu agreed, mentally kicking himself. For a moment, he had completely forgotten about how complicated the situation was.
I'll let you get some sleep, then. When did you want to leave? As soon as possible,
she said firmly.
Time is of the essence. Besides.
She smiled again, and this time it looked more like her usual kind, sweet and sad.
Even if nobody else there takes this well, it'll be nice to see Mina again. Yeah,
Ryu agreed.
You know, it's only been a few months, but it already seems like an entire lifetime since she hired me and vowed to look for her pet. Before we ever met any of you. Back when Dees was always trying to get me to sneak out of the magic school one night and come drinking with her and the two rowdy friends in the Rangers Guild she was always telling me about.
She giggled.
In retrospect, it might be for the best that I never did. That would have complicated the situation when we first met, just a little. Probably,
Ryu said, smirking as well. They were both still aware of the lingering tension in the air, but pretending they weren't helped a bit.
She told you about us, hey? Good stories, at least. I hope. For a certain definition of good,
she conceded.
Why am I not surprised by this?
Rolling his eyes, he turned towards the door.
We should probably get some sleep. I'll go tell the rest of the guys, so we can leave in the morning. Pretty sure they'll all still be up. Until then,
she said quietly as he closed the door behind him.
All right,
he growled once it was shut.
Whoever's waiting, get up here.
After a moment, Rand and Sten both walked down the stairs, and he glared at them.
I'm not even going to ask what you were supposedly doing up there. Cool.
Sten grinned.
Saves us the trouble of making something up.
Noticing Rand's glare as well, he glanced up.
What? You know how you told me to let you know when you said something Kat would kick you for, if she wasn't there?
The big man sighed.
That would have gotten to. Never mind that,
Ryu said flatly.
We've got a plan now. Tomorrow morning, we're off to Windia. Spread the word, will you? Windia.
Rand frowned for a moment before the light dawned.
I get it. The breath of wind. If we can ride one of the great birds, we will be able to fly onto Avray. Good thinking, boss. Thank Nina.
Ryu shrugged.
It was her idea. Isn't the breath of wind kind of unreliable these days, though?
Sten asked, raising an eyebrow.
She says the royal family knows a way,
Ryu explained, watching their eyes widen.
That's between her and them. I kind of get the feeling Sana and Siso should stay home for this one, though. Guess so.
Rand slowly nodded.
Alright, we'll tell the others. By the way, catch.
Reaching behind him, he tossed a sword through the air, and Ryu snatched it by the hilt.
What's this?
He tested its balance, and blinked.
Say, this is just as good as that sword I got off the Yuparupa. Beretta and Leamington came through,
Sten explained, tossing a new, curved knife in the air and catching it again.
They got one for Jean, too, and a steel battle staff for Kat. She looked like a kid on her birthday. I scored a couple new knives, myself, and Rand got some knuckle guards. Flame enchanted.
Rand bragged, raising his fists to display them. They glinted with a red sheen.
These ought to do some damage. Sounds like we'll be ready for whatever it takes, then.
Ryu smiled as he walked past them, down the stairs.
I'll have to remember to stop by and pay those two soon. Thanks, guys. See you in the morning.
All of a sudden, he felt completely exhausted, physically, mentally and emotionally. Everything that had happened that day was wearing on him. All he wanted to do was sleep and try to forget, if only for a few hours, and so he did. Power. We need yet more of your power. God needs more of your power. Give your soul to God. Pray to God. Praise God. Sacrifice your heart and mind to God. You will become God's power. In the morning, they warped back to Winlan, capital city of the northern country of Windia. Built near the top of a mountain, its buildings rested on a series of rising terraces on the south side. To the east was the Windian Chasm, spanning several miles, and to the north the ocean stretched off towards the pole. At the mountain's peak, the castle towered over the entire land, its dungeons burrowing deep into the mountain beneath the city. Surprisingly, despite the northern climate and the approach of winter, there was no snow in the streets just yet. The higher the level, the more opulent the buildings were. As they grew closer to the palace, even the lower ones were well built and decorated, tall and elegant. Decorative windmills on rooftops were common, and the colors were all bright, both on the houses and on the clothing of the citizens. Unlike most capitals, it was clearly exclusive to the upper classes, and drifters were discouraged. Ryu had never quite felt comfortable there, for that among other reasons, and the group drew more than a few curious glances as they walked towards the front door of the castle.
I sent a message to Mina, late last night, using magic,
Nina told them all quietly as they approached the stone bridge over the moat, most of them shivering in the cold air. They hadn't dressed for it.
She should be able to get us inside. Halt!
One of the guards at the great double doors to the castle called out.
No visitors are being allowed into the castle for now. We are expected,
Nina said, politely but firmly. She was wearing a cloak across her wings, to hide the color of them.
Princess Mina is awaiting is. Her Highness has not told us of any such thing,
the guard replied dubiously, narrowing his eyes.
Who, exactly, are you that she is expecting? Okay,
Ryu muttered.
Not what we were expecting, but we can. It's all right, Ryu,
Nina told him calmly, though her hands were shaking. Still, she looked the guard in the eye.
It's time for the truth to be known. Please inform Her Highness that Nina is here. Nina?
Another guard asked suspiciously, walking up, as the others began to mutter to each other.
That sounds familiar. Aren't you the one who was here back in midsummer? The one who brought Her Highness through the labyrinth? What does it matter?
Nina asked, voice level, but Ryu could tell that she was starting to lose her nerve.
It matters because that girl had black wings,
the first guard told her, scowling openly now.
And you seem to be going to a lot of effort to keep yours covered. Why is that? There's something strange going on here,
the second one agreed.
Even the royal family was acting weird about that girl. It is you, isn't it? What exactly are you trying to? And are our decisions to be questioned by our doormen now?
A cold voice interrupted as the doors opened, and all the guards froze before slowly turning towards the woman standing there. She was an attractive middle-aged lady, her hair dyed a bright pink to match her wings, and she wore a white gown of simple design but expensive appearance. A light golden crown rested atop her head, and her eyes were the same green as Nina's.
Why? Your Highness.
One of the guards blurted out.
We didn't mean to. To openly declare your mistrust of us before the entire city.
The Queen cut him off.
At a time like this? No.
Another shouted, as they all went pale.
We didn't mean. We were just. It was an accident. Forgive us, please. Perhaps,
the Queen murmured, not sounding convinced.
For now, remain at your posts. I will inform you of your punishment at a later date.
She started to turn around, then paused as they all relaxed.
However, should this incident ever repeat itself, you will all be executed immediately.
She turned her gaze to Nina.
Well, what are you waiting for? Come with me at once. I am in no mood for further foolishness. Yes, Your Highness,
Nina said, head bowed. The group followed her inside, and through the castle halls, without another word being exchanged. It seemed that word of the Queen's mood had spread, none of the guards throughout the rest of the ancient stone halls so much as glanced their way. Soon, they came to a private sitting room, and though more guards were posted outside, none followed them in. All the same, Ryu nodded to Sten and Bao, and the two of them both stood at the side of the door once the Queen had closed it.
Thank you, young men,
she said, glancing at them.
This conversation must not be overheard, under any circumstances. We understand, Your Highness,
Ryu replied solemnly.
It won't happen. I will trust your ability, then.
The Queen nodded, and then she turned to Nina, and the cold expression finally left her face.
Nina. It's been so long. Look at you. You've become such a beautiful young woman. Mother.
Nina whispered, and then they were embracing, both of them trying and failing to hold in the tears.
When I received word from the magic school that you had not returned to them, I feared the worst,
the Queen murmured.
But here you are, safe and sound. And with friends. They took me in, Mother,
Nina explained quietly.
I have a place to belong, now. A home, a career. People who I can rely on. And yet you return here.
The Queen demanded, anxiety entering her voice now.
After everything you have done, everything we have risked. You come back? After what happened to you before we sent you away? You found the message I sent to Mina, then?
Nina asked, as they both stepped back.
Of course I did.
The Queen shook her head.
The silly girl was never able to keep a secret. As soon as I noticed how excitable she was today. But I never expected this.
She lowered her head.
Nina. Why have you returned? Is there something I am missing here?
Spar asked politely.
Later,
Rand muttered.
Not the time, man. It is a valid question,
the Queen disagreed, though she turned to look at a wall.
If you have risked yourselves by accompanying my daughter here, for whatever reason. No. If she has trusted you with her identity at all, then you deserve to know.
Ryu, Kat, and Jean all exchanged a glance, but none of them said anything.
In recent centuries, an unfortunate superstition has cropped up in our country's populace,
the Queen explained.
In short, it is believed that the Wing clan was cursed for amending the laws against inter-clan reproduction, as was the Dragon clan. The more superstitious among us believe that when a child with black wings is born, it will herald the doom of the Wing clan, and that we will soon vanish as the Dragon clan did centuries ago. Okay,
Sten growled.
That is officially the stupidest thing I have ever heard, and I once got ordered to attack a fortified position single-handedly. To call it illogical would be an understatement so gross as to defy the definition of the word,
Spar agreed.
Unfortunately, such stupidity is no proof against the foolish,
the Queen told them.
While black is the rarest color, once that superstition took hold. There have been no recorded incidents of a child sprouting wings of that color. We are not born with them, you see. The wings generally grow around age 8. That's sick,
Rand snarled, eyes flashing.
I see,
Spar murmured.
So, when Nina reached that age, the Crown Princess. At first, we thought that the authority of the royal family would be enough,
the Queen said, voice soft.
We declared that anybody found openly declaring belief in the mark of the black wings would be killed. But then, there was an incident,
Nina cut in, and Ryu suddenly remembered the memory they had seen in Gondaref's mind.
The woman who had been my nanny took me down into the dungeons and cut off my wings, claiming it was the only way to save the country without killing me. Shit,
Kat hissed.
We found her in time to reattach her wings, but it was clear that even we would be unable to protect her,
the Queen continued.
So we pretended that she had died, and sent her away. Even at that age, her magical talents were blossoming, and so we enrolled her at the magic school in Oria under a false name, far enough away that she would be safe. We never had the heart to forbid Mina from seeing her, however, and allowed her to visit on occasion.
She turned to face them again, and her face was troubled.
And now she refuses to tell us of what happens when she does, ever since the Joker gang. Nina, what has happened to you? Who are your friends, and what are you doing? Your Highness.
Ryu started to say, fumbling for an excuse.
It's all right, Ryu,
Nina told him, straightening her back.
I'm not ashamed of my choices. Or of my friends.
She looked her mother in the eye.
We're a group of adventurers, mother. Freelance. I've hired on as one of their black mages. Freelance adventurers.
The queen demanded sharply.
You've joined a group of mercenaries, Nina.
She glanced at them again, one by one, and this time she was clearly looking them over carefully. Her eyes widened as they fell upon Jean.
You. No, you can't be, and yet. Prince Ikaro. It is indeed I, your highness,
Jean agreed, bowing politely.
Many years have passed since last we met, and yet you are still as beautiful as ever. I assure you, all of my comrades are the finest of men and women as well.
He paused.
And Spar, of course. Was that truly necessary?
Spar murmured.
A grass man.
The queen stared.
And.
As her eyes fell upon Dee's, her face paled.
You. But that means.
She turned back to Ryu, the light dawning in her eyes.
I suppose I shouldn't be surprised that a member of the Windian royal family recognizes me,
Dees commented wryly.
I'm afraid it's that time again, your highness. Then. Nina.
She turned back to her daughter, trembling.
Is that why you're here? For the mark of the great bird? I'm afraid so, mother,
Nina agreed, looking down.
It was foretold, and now it is necessary. We need the breath of wind. Why?
The queen demanded.
What could possibly make you so desperate? I'm afraid that's politically complicated, mother,
Nina told her firmly, looking her in the eye again.
If we were to tell you, it could compromise your relationship with another world power, one which Windia is on rocky terms with already. Politically.
The queen turned to look at them all again.
Mercenaries. Are you the band known as the Dragon Kin? That's us.
Ryu nodded.
I see word really is getting around.
The queen's eyes dimmed.
I must. Consider this. In the meantime, Nina. Your arrival is somewhat timely. We were about to send word, asking you to come here. What?
Nina blurted out.
Why would you?
She trailed off, face growing horrified.
It's father, isn't it? I'm afraid so.
The queen closed her eyes.
He's taken a turn for the worse, Nina. Our physicians are unable to identify the reason, and even white magic is having little effect. They say that he'll be lucky to make it to next summer. He wants to see you, Nina. Can I?
Nina whispered.
Immediately.
She glanced at Ryu.
I think the rest of you should come, as well. As you wish, your highness,
Ryu said, slightly awkwardly, and they all followed the two women back out into the halls and up several flights of stairs. On what Ryu judged to be the top floor of the castle, towers aside, they entered a quiet, out-of-the-way room that turned out to be the royal apartment. Two men were hovering over the bed there, where an elderly man of the Wing clan lay, dozing, with a crown resting on his head. One of the men standing over the bed was a middle-aged Wing clansman, thinning hair and beard the same shocking orange as his wings and eyes. Ryu's own eyes narrowed when he saw the other. He was a cadaverously thin priest of Saint Eva, clad in humble brown robes with a circlet of cloth around his head. His hair was unusually shaggy, a dark black-blue color, and his features were almost skeletally gaunt, giving his appearance an unpleasant cast.
Ah, your highness,
he said, turning towards them as they entered.
It's good to see you again. Have you come to pray to Saint Eva for His Majesty's health? Father Manson,
the queen replied politely.
I'm afraid not. Somebody has arrived who the king wishes to see. If you'll excuse us. I am afraid that is out of the question, your highness.
The priest shook his head regretfully.
His Majesty and I were in the middle of discussing the possibility of his conversion when he dozed off, and I must be here to resume that conversation whenever he awakens. Unless, of course, you were to order me to leave.
Though he was not actually smiling, his face was so sunken that it looked as if he were grinning through his cheeks.
Hey, you,
Cat started to growl.
Listen,
Rand snarled at the same time, only for Sten to put a hand on both their arms.
Very well, Your Grace.
The Queen inclined her head coldly.
Remain if you wish.
She turned to the wing clansman.
How is he, Dr. Heinlein? It appears to have subsided for the moment, but the symptoms are not fading,
Heinlein murmured, tugging on his short beard.
He sleeps most of the day. I doubt he is in immediate danger, but eventually.
Shrugging helplessly, he looked past her at the guests.
Who are? Princess Nina.
He jumped several feet into the air, eyes widening.
You're alive.
Manson's sunken eyes were remarkably calm.
It's a long story, Doctor,
Nina murmured, smiling slightly.
It's good to see you again.
Crossing to the bed, she touched the king's shoulder.
Father? I'm here. Nina.
The king whispered, stirring.
That voice. Is it really you? Yes, Father,
she whispered.
It's me. I've come home. You.
The king's eyes opened, and he stared at her in wonder.
You still think of me as your father? Even after all I've done? Of course I do.
She began crying silently again, though her smile remained.
I never blamed you for what happened, Father. Never. I never forgave myself, Nina.
The king said quietly.
For being unable to protect you. I should have known what that woman would do to you. I should have kept you safe from all of those fools. And all I could do was exile you, from your family and your home. I always thought that you must have hated me. You kept me alive, Father,
Nina told him softly.
How could I possibly hate you for that? Saying goodbye to you and Mother, and Mina.
She closed her eyes for a moment.
It was horrible. And my life after that. Yes, it was empty and bleak. But I never blamed any of you. And
she opened her eyes again.
I've found happiness now, Father. I've made friends, ones who trust me with their lives, as I trust them with mine. I have a new home, and a life worth living. So please, don't worry about me anymore. Oh, Nina.
The king whispered.
You've become such a strong young woman. I'm so happy that you.
He suddenly began coughing horribly, a hideous, wet tearing noise that shook the bed.
Father.
Nina's eyes widened.
Your Majesty.
Dr. Heinlein leaned forward.
I'll prepare more medicine. Your medicine is worthless, old man,
Father Manson interrupted.
You have failed, and admitted it yourself. Only prayer to Saint Eva can save His Majesty now.
Leaning over, he did his best to look compassionate.
Now is the time to accept the teachings of Saint Eva into your heart. For yourself, and for Windia. If your country follows your example, and prays to Saint Eva, then God will heal you.
Even as Kat and Rand both started to move forward again, Ryu glanced at them and shook his head, and they subsided, though their glares could have melted steel. Even theirs were nothing compared to Nina's, though, for a moment, he thought that she would incinerate the priest on the spot, before she turned back to her father as his coughing subsided.
I have great respect for the Church of Saint Eva,
the king said quietly.
Much good has been done in this world because of your followers. However, I still cannot accept your teachings, or devote myself to your beliefs. But why?
Manson demanded harshly, feigned benevolence vanishing.
What possible reason could you have for refusing at this point? Is your hatred of God so great that you would deny His existence, even now? Of course not.
The king shook his head.
But if I were to publicly announce my conversion now, then as you have said, many of my clansmen would follow my example. Not because they truly believe, but because I am their king. What sort of leader would I be if I asked them to do such a thing for my sake, and go against what is in their hearts? Faith is a thing that must be decided for yourself, not for another. And certainly not for a dying old man none of them have ever even met, just because he is their king. But you will die.
Manson protested.
That may be so,
the king admitted.
But I would rather die as a good king, than live as a bad king. I thank you for your consideration, Father Manson, but I will not make the Church of Saint Eva our national religion, and that is final. Very well.
Manson's eyes almost seemed to draw into his head, as dark as empty sockets.
But you will regret making enemies of our church, O mighty King of Windia.
He snarled his last words like an epithet as he turned away and stalked towards the door.
Necromancer, necromancer, necromancer.
By the time the team had realized what he had said, and turned to stare, he was gone, but not before Ryu glanced at the dragon's tear and saw its oily black color.
What a dreadful man,
the king murmured once the door was slammed.
I need no prayers. My daughter's love is enough for me. Thank you, Nina.
His eyes drifted shut, and he began to doze once more.
We should go,
the queen said quietly. She had remained silent for the entire conversation.
We don't want to exhaust him.
Yes, Nina agreed, though she still waited a few moments more before taking her hand from her father's shoulder. They all walked outside, and sat down in chairs out in the hall, everybody remaining silent until Nina spoke again.
Mother. Please don't tell him what I intend to do. I won't,
the queen promised.
If he only has months to live, then. Yes, it's best that he never knows. All right, that does it,
Kat said firmly, meeting Nina's eyes.
I hate to jump in here, but I think we're all missing something, and the more I hear about it, the more I don't like it. Agreed.
Ryu nodded.
Just what is this secret, Nina? What are you going to have to do, in order to awaken the breath of wind? That is also something you have a right to know,
Nina admitted quietly.
Ryu, you read an account of the Second Dragon War recently. Did they mention the fate of our ancestor, the Queen of the Sky? No, it didn't,
Ryu said, frowning.
It said that the hero of the dragons married her, and became Prince Regent when they ascended the throne, and it went into some detail about their children. But it never said what happened to either of them. There is a reason our clan turned from the dragon god,
the queen explained, closing her eyes.
When your ancestors married, and set a precedent for both their clans, they defied Loden's advice, and he warned them that one day, a price would have to be paid. In the Queen of the Sky's 40th year, the dragon god came to her, and told her that that account was due. She went with him, into the royal family's crypt, beneath the palace. And Loden entombed her within a statue. Alive?
Bao yelped.
Yeah.
Dee scowled.
When I heard about that one. Well, now you know why I'm not too happy with the old man these days. When her husband learned of this, it was already too late,
the queen continued.
It is said that his wrath shook the earth, and when he had exhausted his initial rage, he publicly denounced Loden to the world before leaving Winlan, alone and on foot. None know where he went from there, and when the crown prince had ascended the throne, he turned from Loden as well. Damn,
Ryu whispered, staring at his hands as so much that had been unclear in the past suddenly made sense.
Why? It was to preserve the breath of wind,
Nina said, quiet but firm.
Loden knew that one day I would need to awaken it, and that by their actions, our ancestors had ensured that I would not be able to do so on my own. The Queen of the Sky's soul still dwells within the statue, or so it is told, waiting for the one who will come to her one day and free her from her duty, by taking her breath from her and adding it my own. And what exactly does that entail, Mademoiselle Nina?
Jean asked, unusually blunt.
I will have to go into the royal family's crypt, and confront my ancestor,
Nina told them.
To fight her, alone, to the death. Nina.
Nina's voice came from behind the door of the guest room, followed by a light knock.
Are you there? Nina.
Nina glanced up from the note she was writing, and quickly slipped it into a book on the writing desk. Rising, she opened the door and was immediately hugged, which she returned, quietly noting that she no longer had to bend over or crouch down to do so.
You've grown taller. I know.
She smiled, briefly excited.
It's been happening a lot in the last few months. Maybe soon, I'll almost be as tall as you. As Kat, maybe,
Nina teased gently, releasing her and stepping back.
It's good to see you again. I was wondering when you were going to come find me.
It was nighttime now, many hours since she had told her friends just what she would have to do in order to awaken the breath of wind. Most of them had had objections, of course, but before long Ryu had decided that they would talk about them in the morning, when they actually went down into the crypt. Until then, he had told them, there was going to be no more talk of business for the rest of the day. Nina had been grateful for that. The more the issue was discussed, the more likely it was that one of them would pick up on what she had left out. Instead, they had accepted her mother's hospitality for the night. For obvious reasons, they couldn't exactly attend the formal dinner with her and Mina, but the queen had had the same dishes served there brought to the guest rooms they had been given, and everybody had enjoyed it, though none of them were in the mood to talk much. This far north, it was readily apparent that winter was nigh, and that the first snow was expected any day now. It was almost as if their mood was reflecting that cold grey wind and sky, due to everything that had happened, and was still happening.
Mother wouldn't let me until most of the rest of the castle was asleep,
Mina explained, pouting.
She even posted guards outside my rooms with instructions not to let me out. I'm sorry, I knew I should have hidden the note better, but I was just so happy when you said you would be coming back home, even if it's not to stay. I thought you would be glad to hear that,
Nina replied, smiling slightly for a moment.
Ryu and Bao and Dees and Jean were all wondering where you were. They've all been looking forward to seeing you again. Dees.
Mina blinked for a moment before smiling again.
She's joined your group too? That's great, Nina. Ever since Ryu said that you were looking for another black mage, I was always hoping she'd be it. Do you have a full team now, then? At the moment, that seems to be the case,
Nina replied evasively. Fortunately, Mina didn't seem to pick up on that.
I still can't believe Prince Jean joined you, too,
she said, smile widening.
I'll bet that helps you when it comes to getting jobs. We try not to bring it up, actually.
Nina smiled back again, happy for something else to talk about.
I'm surprised you even remember him. You were barely more than a baby when he used to visit us here. You are going to stop by and see the rest of them, aren't you? Of course I am.
Mina nodded quickly.
You were first, that's all. Good.
Nina dropped her smile then. There were other things to talk about, and they weren't pleasant ones.
You didn't tell me father was so ill. I was going to,
Mina murmured, looking down at her feet.
But I just couldn't. It didn't seem right to write it in a letter, instead of telling you personally. I was just getting ready to make another visit to you, and tell you then, when your message came.
She met Nina's eyes.
Nina. He can't die. He just can't. I hope he doesn't,
Nina agreed noncommittally. She had seen enough of the world, and of how it worked, that she had no illusions about her father's mortality, but she also knew that pointing this out to Mina would be the worst thing she could do.
I really do. But Mina. If he does, just if. You need to be there for Mother. She'll be the Queen Regent until you come of age. She's going to need all of your help for that. What?
Mina frowned, eyes darting up.
But you said you were going to stop all the lies, Nina. That you were going to ask Mother and Father to acknowledge you again, and tell everybody you were their daughter. I was, and I am,
Nina said quietly, resigning herself to what couldn't be put off any longer. She had been able to hide the true nature of her impending sacrifice from the others, but Mina, like her mother, would know already.
Tomorrow, Mother will receive me in front of the court, and reveal the truth to them all. Because it will be necessary, in order for me to go to the royal family's crypt. To undertake the ordeal awaiting me there. What?
Mina couldn't have looked more stunned if she had tried.
Nina, you. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm that Nina,
she whispered, and for the first time she actually believed that, understanding and accepting everything it implied without a trace of the skepticism she had always directed towards what they had called destiny bullshit in the past.
And Ryu is that Ryu, and Dees is that Dees, and she always was. You haven't seen her since she joined, have you? She's taken to her normal form now. I'm sorry, Mina, but it's true. It's been 1,000 years, and it's that time again. And our family has been preparing for it ever since the previous one. You're going down there.
Mina said, still frozen.
You're going to undertake the ordeal of the Queen of the Sky? Why? Why would you do that, Nina? Because.
Nina took a deep breath before continuing.
Because my friends need the breath of wind. They need the sky. They need to fly. And I'm the only one who can give that to them. Mina, our enemies. I can't tell you who they are, but they've taken Ran's mother. There's no way we can get to them except by flight. It's the only way. And we have to stop them, Mina. If we don't, then they won't stop until the world is theirs to destroy.
The urge to tell her, to warn her that the Church of Saint Eva were the enemy rose suddenly, but she managed to hold it back, as she had with her mother.
Isn't there any other way?
Mina murmured, pleading.
What about them, Nina? How do you think they'll feel once they realize what you've done? They'll never forgive me,
Nina admitted.
But it's the only way, Mina. It really is. Both because of my destiny, and because of what's happening, here and now, with us. They'll never forgive me, but they'll go on. Dees is a better black mage than I could ever be, so my absence from the group won't change that much. End.
She closed her eyes before continuing, her heart frozen and still.
With me out of the way, Kat and Ryu will. That won't be a problem anymore, either. I'm sorry, Mina. But I have to. No.
Mina suddenly glared at her through her tears.
No, you don't have to. That's what everybody always says. Mother and father said they had to send you away. You always told me you had to pretend you weren't my sister anymore. And now you're telling me you have to give up your life, and become a great bird, even if that means you'll never be able to turn back into you ever again. You don't have to, Nina. That's not the way it works. It does,
Nina whispered, tearing her eyes away. She couldn't bear to meet Mina's anymore.
That is the way the world works, Mina. It's hard and it's harsh and it's cruel and it doesn't make sense, and it's the way it works, and nobody can change that. Not any of us in this world, or any god or goddess in it either. Sometimes there just aren't any happy endings, and even if there are, sometimes they're not as happy as they seem. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Mina just stared at her for a moment more, and then she turned and bolted from the room, tears streaming behind her as she ran, without another word.
I'm sorry,
Nina repeated quietly.
I'm so sorry.
After another moment, she returned to her desk and pulled the note she had been writing out again. It still wasn't finished, and she had many more to write, one to each of her closest friends in the world. It was the only goodbye she would be able to give them. In restless dreams I walked alone.